Sound Sunday on today's podcast. I'm your host, Seriously Me. It's my guest.
Hello, I'm DJ Superman from the Tuck Talk Podcast.
And the Gnomish Warlord.
And the Gnomish Warlord. If you didn't know, it's all in the beard. So, today's query is, has Hollywood culturally appropriated nerddom? And I'm gonna state my bias at the beginning. I would say yes, but let's hear some thoughts on the matter.
Oh man, me first? Oh goodness. Let's see here. I mean, there does seem to be. All right, so there's been a couple like movies and series that have come out of like they like, oh my god, I read these books. They're coming out. Holy crap! I cannot believe this. I can't wait to see it in action. And then you see it in action, and you're like, that's not the same. What's missing? You know, like there's like, I wouldn't say a soul of it that's missing, but like maybe the mark has not been hit. So I think, you know, so I think it is good to explore what that is. You know, what might, as a nerd, what would make you be like, hey, something's not there? What's that core essence that would really be like, man, that was amazing?
Well, that really goes into them trying to take the culture to use it for their financial means without actually knowing the culture and actually giving us what we want. It's like, I tell everybody all the time, and I get this argument, whatever it is, Green Lantern itself was not a bad movie. It was just done very badly because the like aspect of how he was Green Lantern in that movie was Green Lantern, but they gave us trash villains and like all this other stuff, which made it a bad movie. Like,
Yeah.
out of all the people that they could have like had him going against, what was this weird cloud thing? Like, what? Like, no. Like, actually talk to some people that know the content and deliver. Like, it's crazy.
See, there's the key of it. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, we've got to promote like all these different things, you know, to make nerddom relevant. And there's a lot of stigma that Hollywood is basically labeled, nerd pop culture with, like, you know, like, oh, it's misogynistic or it's all these things. So we have to do all this stuff to rectify that. And I think that's gaslighting at its finest. Like culture, like, you know, like when you think about nerd culture, right? We're probably one of the most accepting groups, like just across the board, like, because we grew up with, like, you know, female superheroes who were very empowered women, or, you know, our ethnically diverse, like, you know, characters like Storm, you know, all-time classic X-Men, you know. But
I mean, X-Men is a good example, like, because I mean, how many teenagers who were nerds growing up 10, 20 years ago who felt like a mutant in school?
yeah,
Like they felt like they were a mutation.
yeah, like there was something outside the regular spectrum. So I think it really is. It is gaslighting at its finest, saying basically like, oh, this culture's got all these problems, so we're taking it and we're rectifying, like we're fixing it, quote unquote. And I think that's one of the things where they really like justify like what they do. And the other big issue I see is Lord of the Rings, one of the most successful series of movies, you know, based on a book, even though you can point out, you can nitpick it to the day it goes home, and fans will still love it, even though they're like, oh, there's this that's wrong, or this I didn't like, or what, but they still love it, and they still went to see it in droves. It's the only movie I've ever seen 3 months after the release date, still in theaters doing strong. Only one. Why? Because the people who made the movie appreciated the content. Like, they knew it, and there might have been, like, you know, mistakes made along the way, but nothing's ever perfect. But they had a love for the content. And the thing is, we now see, like, it really showed in She-Hulk, where the people who were doing She-Hulk they had never read a She-Hulk comic. and it
What?
showed. Yes, and it showed.
Oh,
It showed. There was no appreciation, and it's
Who's the guy who plays The Witcher?
Henry Cavill,
Yeah.
and that shows.
So that's a good example of the appreciation of the material.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I feel like now I'm not well versed in actors and their names and all this, but like, I mean, that single actor and his roles that he plays, people speak so highly of him
Mm-hmm.
in the nerd community because of his appreciation
Mm-hmm.
for
the source
the
material.
for the material.
Yeah.
You know, and like, so he stands out.
Mm-hmm. And that's
No, but what do you have then when you have people like Hugh Jackman that played Wolverine that didn't even know what Wolverine was when he got into the role? But he still became
but
the
he
Wolverine
did-
we know.
he did what actors should do. He immersed himself. And he wasn't like, so he was the actor, but he was not like, a lot of it comes down to the directors and writers, right? So an actor should be, you give them material and they're like, they embody the part, right? Well, that's what they should do.
Like the Joker.
Yeah, like the Joker.
All the Jokers that people respect and are like, hey, this was a good Joker, are like, they bring out the Joker side.
Yeah, that very essence of the character. And that's what that's what actors should do. But when you have a writer who doesn't appreciate, doesn't understand, or doesn't think they need to understand the source material, and I mean that's why Henry Cavill left. You know, he's like, because he had an issue with the direction they were taking The Witcher away from the source material, and he had an issue with it. And then not even like gaslighting, but they actually attacked his character. So when he left, decided to leave Netflix as The Witcher, they literally came out, they're like, oh, there was a problem on set with him being disrespectful to female cast members. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like, this man is known throughout Hollywood and everywhere as like one of the most respectful gentlemen on set.
Yeah.
And they went so far as to
mean,
try and besmirch his character because they're like, oh, well, we got to find a reason for people to be okay with him leaving. It can't be us. Like,
yeah,
that's the
because,
thing.
well, that's there's a dollar attached to that. Like, your perception, like the audience's perception of him is fond. So when he leaves, it speaks illy of you when he leaves. And he's like, hey, well, the reason he is so well liked in the nerd community is his understanding of it.
Yeah.
And he's leaving because of his understanding of it. That doesn't bode well for the dollar amount on your next project. So to compensate for that, trying to smudge his character as a business sense makes sense to me.
Oh,
I definitely don't agree with it.
No, that's because that's not ethical. That's bad business. Like, if you have to resort to like dirty tactics, then you're not an upstanding business. And I hate to say it, Netflix, but that's on you. Clean your house. But I mean that's a thing we see. We also see a lot of the next thing I would like to get to is. So there seems to be an issue where they have that movie-going audiences, specifically for superhero movies, is predominantly male. And they're like, oh, it's this or it's that. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Is there a problem with the fact that the predominant viewers of cinema for superhero movies is male? Is this a quote-unquote a problem as they see it?
Well, I mean, like when you're a kid growing up, like superheroes are literally, well, I mean that's what they are. They're heroes. Like how many times did you watch or read about a war hero in history? Like even every boy I knew in school, like George Washington, was just like oh my gosh, this is the American hero. Like he's portrayed as a hero, and now you got like superheroes on the TV in your comics, and they're just the pinnacle of your imagination, right? Somebody like, how in depth is the imagination behind the Marvel universe, the DC universe? So many nuances are there, and that is good to have something to idolize and like be like, can I get to that standard? Maybe not like Superman's strength, but like the morality behind Superman. You know, the ability to have all this might behind you and still like function in the most fair way that you can.
Yeah.
While having all those like advantages over everybody else. And like that's really good. And like boys, you know, in the past were encouraged to be leaders and be at the front. And now, you know, there's a lot of encouragement to women to be leaders and be at the front. And like there's a little bit of transition time. But you have to understand that the dads grew up with these things. And of course they want their sons to appreciate something they appreciate. And like, I mean, Superman's like the baddest man you get. You know, like he's OP in every universe. Like he's just, so like, you're gonna have boys who, for lack of a better term, romanticize that image and want to aspire to something of such greatness. So, you know, like, and like trying, like, of course your audience is gonna be primarily male. It's like, you know, and like men have different interests than women for the past hundreds of years, you know, and now we have a more modern age where things are overlapping more, but biologically there's differences in like, you know, like as some would say, you know, like men want, you know, men are interested in things and women are interested in people, and that's statistically biologically proven across like, you know, like the most like, how would you say, robust studies. So you apply that to like, you know, superheroes, and like, yeah, you're gonna have men, you know, using YouTube more often than women. You know, you're gonna have men watching superheroes more often than women. You know, like that's just how it is. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the more predominant audience being on the male side, but I think it is slowly like evening out, as you kind of said. You know, it's the overlapping and whatnot, because not only is the market, you know, of course, generated towards males, but we're seeing also in the culture that they're trying to like stuff like Captain Marvel, or you know, other characters of that sort, or even like on CW, what, Batwoman, I think it is. They're trying to like cater to like the female audience, and I get it, but there are still females that just like the male characters. Also, I know plenty of females that like Flash and others like that. So it's just like I get what they're doing, but at the same time, I think it's starting to even out either way.
You want to cater to the female audience. You're doing it wrong if you're going for Captain Marvel. I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know what? So that caters to the male audience.
Well, no,
especially if you do the female hero accurately and correctly. If you do it, like, again, going back to source material, and you get the right thing, and you're not pushing like some kind of political agenda behind the female main character, you're going to get the male guys. You want to get the females, you need to make the vampire hero be a badass. You know, like Blade or Morbius. And I know that sounds like a little bit like, wait a minute, what are you going with? Are you doing some kind of like Vampire Diary? Yes, yes I am.
Well, it's because
you want to get the female audience. You create the Beast of Beauty and the Beast.
Well, the
get him as a hero.
The problem is like they've misjudged femininity. Like they're all their marketing towards women is based on feminism, and the issue with that is whereas women are think they want to connect like with feminism, but biologically they're at a loss. It's like, you know, they're like, you know, they don't want to go to the movie necessarily to be like, oh, I want to see this really hot woman do these really cool things, where guys like going to the theater.
Yeah,
they want to see, you know, a guy, you know, not this, you know, there's always exceptions, but the vast majority of women, they want to go see like a guy who personifies what they're interested in, you know.
Like a deeper desire.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that they can't enjoy, like, you know, like Wonder Woman or whatever, you know, but I think there's a misperception on how to market to women, you know, because they're doing it through the lens of feminism, which, you know, it's like how they like in Captain Marvel, Batwoman, even the Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah, the new Doctor.
Yeah. They all do it by like, they're like, oh, well, we're better because we're women. And I was like, I don't think the majority of women actually think or are interested in that. They just want to see a woman, like the Wonder Woman movie, which was incredible, which they flubbed up on the second one, but the first Wonder Woman movie, Wonder Woman was never like, oh, I'm so much better because I'm a woman. She doesn't need to state it. It's like a person who comes in and says, I'm the boss. Like, you're not going to respect somebody like that because they have to say they're the boss. Like, if you know they're the boss, it just is personified. Like, it radiates from them. And that's what good, strong women character, like, they radiate that, but when you force it, like they did with Captain Marvel or whatever, they're like, oh, I'm such an oppressed woman, but look how powerful. Everybody's just kind of looking at, you're alienating your male audience, and you're disconnecting with your female audience.
Yeah. No, I do think there's a lack of understanding. No, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I understand, like, the inner working of a female brain. But I'm also not going to sit here. But like, I'm also not going to sit here and pretend like I understand the inner working of a male brain either. But we all know enough to anybody who's actually looked into the research of what women are interested. Like, as awkward it might be, maybe you bring up porn. Like, males have a very visual, like, this is what we're going for.
Well, it's corn on YouTube nowadays.
Oh, so yeah, if you bring up corn,
it's
got the juice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, you bring up corn, it's got the juice.
We're completely censored now. Piss off, YouTube.
That's insane. Oh, that's insane. But there is studies that show what a female actually is interested in, and they're trying to push people. Like, I get it. You wanna what is it called? Push the envelope, right?
Yeah.
You wanna create something new. You wanna be innovative, and this is a modern age, and you wanna be innovative. You wanna keep up with the times, and there's a lot of money in that. But I think you hit on something very important. Like, you can innovate without alienating your primary market.
Yes.
So there's no reason not to get additional market shares. There's zero reason not to do that. I understand business. Like go for it. Like, by all means. But you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot while you're doing it. Because I think, now, I have not personally watched She-Hulk, but I've heard plenty of reviews on it where, like, genuine, like, nerdy people, and the weeds out there are just, they're watching and they're like, something's missing. Something's off. It's not quite what I want,
Well,
and they're, like, people... Of course, people are going to throw in the excuse, well, it's because you're male and, patriarchy. But I'm like, no.
I'd like to get to that later, but...
People, like, especially, there's few things that individuals know very well in their life, that they know through and through. But, like, when you enjoy something, when you don't enjoy it, you know what I mean? And, like, the audience, I feel like they spoke on She-Hulk. And plenty of other new things. Like, even one of my favorites, like Wheel of Time.
Oh.
I love those books. And, like, reading those
incredible.
books, I cannot believe, I started reading those books when I was a kid. And, like, the ideas that were in that book weren't even part of our talking points at the time that they came out. They're very, like, progressive in some of the things that were kind of like, how would you say, subtly etched into the writing.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, looking back on it now, I reread the whole series, or listened to a good portion of it on audio. I was like, wow. Like, this guy was like, he was ahead of his time, but then they put it in a series, and I'm thinking, like, people are going to be like fawning over this. This is great material, and then, like, it's not there.
Well, they dropped the ball, like, really bad, and it wasn't.
And you can't blame the animation, like the CGI and all that goes into it.
No,
Like, it was fantastic.
Yeah, like, visually it was very captivating. Like the actors and actresses, they were all like, they played their roles. They didn't respect the source material, and the source material, is very woman forward, and so it shouldn't have been a problem. But they still managed to be like, it's not enough, and they wanted to bend it to their will, and that's the problem. It's like the source material is loved, because of what it was. Like, when you start, like, you're like, you're trying to perfect something that was already fine, you know, and you're like, and it's like you're missing pieces. So the more you try and perfect it, and you end up with Frankenstein, and everybody kind of recoils, and they're just like,
Yeah. Kind of like the first Sonic.
See,
But-
that's
and
a
the-
good example.
yeah,
But
they listen.
they listen,
Yeah.
and it made all the difference.
But if they did it right the first time, they wouldn't have had to make the mistake to listen.
True.
It's fair. That's
But
fair.
I
Because
mean,
we saw that clip just enough time to be like, oh, no, we do not want this. Go back in your room and fix it. Like no.
No, it was so cringy, like, you know. And I mean, they recouped some of the funds by using him in Chip and Dale, which was
Oh man, that's funny.
oddly genius in its own right, you know. But
I mean, you have literally hundreds and thousands of people who work on movies and things nowadays. And I get, like, when you have so many people trying to, like, formulate this next thing, like, there's a lot of different opinions, and not everybody's going to be satisfied. You're going to ask everybody the same question, and you're never going to get the same answer across everybody in the world.
well, not everybody, but like business, so on and so forth. It's the majority, right? And what Hollywood is taken to doing, in my opinion, and you guys can tell me how you feel about this, is like when fans don't like something, they just chastise them. They're like, oh, it's because you don't like diversity, or you don't like women, or you're a misogynist, or you're any of these things, or, you know, or you're racist. That's a great one to throw around, or whatever, you know. And you're just like, well, I didn't say any of those things. You're just I didn't like how you presented it, you know. I didn't like the content, and that makes me all of these things. I feel like that's a thing they do in Hollywood. I mean, because when people didn't like She-Hulk, like they were like, oh, it's because they're all X, Y, and B. And the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power or whatever, when that came out, and people had an issue with it because it was rough. Now, it's not visually very appealing, and it's not the worst thing I've ever watched, and I would probably watch it again, you know. But there were some serious issues. Like, again, don't make a main character that nobody likes. That's why Supergirl was terrible. Like the series. Like, they made the main character was Supergirl, and had a lot of great accompanying people, like characters that everybody liked, but the main character, Supergirl, was unlikable.
Well, let me ask kind of like a branching question to that. So if you make the main character unlikable, I think you can do that if there's an evolution to the character, and you can do it like have like like making a character weak, but you see like, oh, the potential is there. Like, they're really weak. Everybody's better than them, but they're going to be the strongest.
So a small amendment, I do feel like towards the end, like they did show it took longer in my opinion than it should have, but Galadriel's like character towards the end was more palatable than she was at the start. So there was some progression.
Maybe that's part of the writing then.
Maybe, but there was so much it was very clunky, especially the elves didn't interact very well. It was very stiff, you know. Like, the best interactions in the movie are between I'm like blanked on his name. But anyways,
The dwarf, right?
yeah, it was the
Elrond.
Elrond, yeah, there we go. Sorry. Oh god, nerds everywhere.
Those were
Shame upon him.
Well,
You
that-
know,
that-
chastise me.
That felt
but
very like.
that was so natural. But Durin, I think it's Durin the Third, you know, and Elrond, you know, their interaction was so wholesome, so natural and organic. Like, it felt right, you know, and that's what kept me watching the series, you know, despite all the other faux pas and issues or whatever. Like, I wanted to see where that went, you know.
Yes. No, very much so. That was definitely a great part. And it's like, it wasn't like there wasn't like action really in that. That's like, that is the epitome of storytelling. That's what we want.
They touched on the essence of the source material.
Yes.
And that's the part that kept me in it. Like, the other stuff where they were just like, source material, over the shoulder, out the window, baby in the bathwater, and all that deals. And that's where they started to... But the thing is, they didn't want to be criticized, so they were just like, well... It was a huge thing. They're like, Lord of the Rings fan base is racist. Like that's like what they went with because there was an issue
Really?
with it was a huge thing. They're like Lord of the Rings fan base is racist, and then they started in on J.R.R. Tolkien saying that his work portrayed racism. I was like, whoa, because you guys couldn't like that's the thing. They don't want to listen to constructive criticism. Now there was one dark elf. I forget. He's played by I think a Puerto Rican actor. I forget or whatever. But like he's obviously most of the elves are like all white or light skinned or whatever. And he's like, I'm like I play in D&D, and I'm like, and they kind of allude to that he's like he might be like half elf, half human or whatever. But he's like a dark elf, and I play D&D. I'm like I'm fine. I'm down. Like his character was like they tried too hard to make him intense. But I didn't hate his character, like, and the fact that he was dark or light, like I realized like that's can be an issue with like Tolkien lore or whatever. But for me, I was like, you have to make some allowances, and that was one I was willing to like, I was like, But saying to the audience, you're all racist because you have an issue because we changed the lore. I'm sorry if you have lore and you do something with it, you're going to have people who can give you criticism or take it as constructive criticism. Don't just throw your hands up and be like, you damn racist.
Well, what about the origination of orcs? My understanding, so like there, I think there is room to edit the source material to a certain extent because it doesn't lap very well into visual portraying over because like what you can describe in a couple sentences takes hours of movie time, right? So there's some amount of like finagling and finesse you got to put into from paper to movie, and all of us understand that and accept that to a certain extent.
Yes.
And if the actor's good at acting and he's competent, most of us are going to overlook it, and there you have those exceptions. But if you're changing lore, like I'll give an example of lore that could probably be changed. Even Tolkien was on the fence of whether the orcs came from the elves, right?
Yeah.
And so like maybe you could edit that, but it's hard to do because you already have a movie out there that specifies where the orcs came from, like Saruman was talking about it.
Yeah.
So like, but that's a place where I could be like, if you know the history very well, you can be like, all right, I can see why they went with this version of Tolkien's theories of where the orcs originated over this one. But like, again, sticking to the source material, I think you nailed it on the head when you were talking about the dwarf and Elrond's interaction. Like, that's
it felt
like,
natural. It felt right.
There's no battle scene in there, and I enjoyed that as much as all the battle scenes. And that's when you got great storytelling. When the like side quest, is as enticing as the other things. And I get like as you want to make money, you want to captivate your audience, so you need a certain amount of like ups and downs, and like you want story building, but you also need action to keep people interested, so on and so forth. So many nuances, but like when you deviate so far, well, people are gonna notice. They're gonna criticize you, and like I have heard so many things. I've heard like I think it was the director of the original Lord of the Rings movie criticizing J.R. Tolkien's work, saying like this or that.
Well, it is he makes a bold claim that he could Peter Jackson makes this claim, in the extended editions when you're listening to the his commentary on the movie. At one point he's like, well, I could have done this better. And I think that's hubris. Like I think he got a little headed, like he got drunk on his success for that moment. I don't think he ever stopped appreciating the work. I think he just had a moment which it showed a lapse in judgment, like when like he broke Gandalf's staff or whatnot. Like you don't want to get drunk on your hubris, but his still like throughout all his movies, like his love for the material showed through. And if you're going to create something new, I think we could all agree on this. If you're going to create something new, do it your way and how you want it, right? But if you've got an established fan base with established source material, respect it, or otherwise you will not have the respect of the people who love it.
So, curveball. So, source material, respect for the audience, Now, I don't know if you would keep this in the nerd realm, but it is fiction and it is sci-fi and all that, and fantasy and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think about making changes such as you have this animated adaptation of The Little Mermaid versus the real life one that's coming out, which we don't know if it's going to be a good movie or not, but then you change the main character from this white girl to a black girl.
So I have some thoughts on that. I think honestly, I think people wouldn't have cared. It's the current social political environment that has made people care. Because I think it's a travesty because as I understand it, she can actually sing like really well. Like she's got a voice on her. And I think she'll be a credit to the role. The problem is everybody's become very touch sensitive because they feel like their memories and things they love are they're just doing it to do it. Like they're not respecting it.
They're forcing it.
Yeah. And so Emma Watson played Belle in Beauty and the Beast live action and she could not carry the notes to where they needed to go. Like she couldn't vocalize at that point. And like it bothered me the whole movie,
Okay, so that's what it was. So I'm not a music person, but I was like, something's off.
Yeah.
I remember it being better in the animated.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I would be excited to see a young woman, be able to hit those notes, because that's why Aladdin did better because everybody had like they were able to personify like because it's their musicals in nature, so. And I don't think nobody was mad that Will Smith, well, I'm sure there were some people who criticized the way Will Smith looked, but overall, like, Will Smith's portrayal of the genie, I felt, obviously it wasn't Robin Williams, but it was still good. It was still something that could, touch my soul. Yeah.
It was a good second.
Yeah.
I can live with that. I can live with if you're like, hey, this is the best we got because Will Smith is a very good actor. I don't get people say, all right, Will Smith just plays Will Smith in every version. I'm like, no.
No,
there's definitely differences in the characters he played. And I felt like I was watching the genie.
Yeah.
I felt like I was watching the genie. It wasn't Robert Williams' genie.
But it was a good genie.
It was a good genie. And you could argue if Robin Williams is the best genie. And, maybe no one will ever compare. And I'm sorry, if you get to the point where you're like, this is the best of the best,
that's still fine.
That's fine. You can come up short of perfection in that role. It's okay to come up short of that. As long as and I did find I watched The Beauty and the Beast and I had an issue with I was like the music feels off.
Yeah.
And I don't have the ear to know what it was. So in my opinion, if you get a Little Mermaid that carries those notes. And I believe they did give her red hair, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that's important. I do think the red is.
It's very iconic.
I think the red hair is important because of the Seven Seas or whatever. Yeah. There's something to do with the Disney lore. I've read a little bit about it, but so I think the red hair is important. I think they got that, and like when I was growing up, because I'm from the north, like that would not have been the first thought that had come to my mind a couple years ago, right? But now, like he said, it's touch sensitive, and when you force it, that's bad.
Right.
But if she's literally the most competent one you've got, bam, you nail it down, And if she is good at singing, I would like something that makes up for whatever rubbed me the wrong way about Beauty and the Beast. Not saying it's bad overall. I'm just saying like part of what I remembered of that animated version was the music, and it was astounding, and it wasn't like the soul wasn't there.
Yeah. So I guess what it really boils down to is, say Hollywood takes a brand or whatever character, and as long as they deliver with the essence of the source material to give us what we want as the story, it's fine as long as you make changes, as long as those changes doesn't take away from the source material.
I think a great example of that is I have watched enough movies of Heath Ledger to be like, all right, this guy is not the Joker. Like, there's no way this guy can ever play the Joker.
Right.
But he took the source material, he embodied the character, and when I first watched the movie, I had no idea that was Heath Ledger.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I was enthralled, I was captivated. It was everything I wanted. It was amazing. It was one of the best-selling movies of its time. Like, yada yada, the list goes on. And he had a lot to do with that. Maybe not all of it, but he definitely had a good portion to do with that. And that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
You can be off the beaten path. You can, but if you like you said, the essence, if you embody the essence of it, doesn't matter what you look like, who you are, what you're doing.
Oh,
I
so I would interject something. So I realize you gotta go, so we're gonna wind this up. But I think unless the character's ethnic background is integral to their character, like Luke Cage. Like if Luke Cage was not black, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, right?
think Black Panther is another example.
But like on the other hand, nobody batted an eye when Nick Fury became black, because he embodied the essence, and his ethnic background wasn't integral to his character. Like you have some characters where it is or isn't. Like I feel like Superman, a farm boy from Kansas. I think like his ethnic appearance, because you couldn't say really background because he's from Krypton, or whatever, but has something to do with how he perceives the world and how he goes about it. So I think those are prime examples where like you have to know when is it okay or when is it it's not even okay, when is it important. But I think like if you're a mermaid under the sea, I think we'll your ethnic background might be a little wishy. But I do think it should be like people should get roles based on their talent primarily.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's all for today. So if you guys enjoyed, and even if you didn't, smash that like button. This is your host, Seriously Me. Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday.